after driving 7 hours through a thunderstorm to surprise my son on his anniversary. I drove 7 hours through a thunderstorm, hips aching from the long ride, gripping the wheel with hands stiff from years of arthritis. On the passenger seat sat a lemon pound cake, his favorite, baked the night before with a little too much love and a little too little sleep. My son, Jacob, was celebrating his 20th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to be there, uninvited but full of hope. When I stepped into the house, drenched and shivering, I heard voices from the dining room. His wife laughed first. Then Jacob said, "I swear, if she shows up, I might fake a heart attack just to get out of it." She chuckled. "She's probably just bored. Or lonely. Maybe we should just change our number." I placed the cake quietly on the kitchen island, lemon glaze still glossy, wrapping damp from the rain. I walked out without a word. 11 days later, I spoke with my lawyer. A month after that, their mortgage was no longer co-signed. At 74, I finally understood. Love without boundaries becomes currency. And I was bankrupt. My name is Margot Lynn, divorced 20 years, breast cancer survivor, and retired English teacher who still grades grocery lists in red pen. After my divorce, I stayed in the Craftsman cottage in Asheville where my son grew up, because the porch light felt like a promise. I live with my rescue cat, Poe, and an herb garden that grows better than my family TIs ever did. Jacob and I had grown distant for years. I chalked it up to adulthood, stress, and the natural drift between generations. But excuses became the only constant. Work deadlines, school events, sick dogs, surprise trips. One year, they forgot my birthday. Another, they sent a gift card without a name. I brushed it off, told myself I was too emotional, too nostalgic, too much a woman stuck in her memories. Still, I sent birthday cards, care packages with old photos and bookshop finds, checks tucked into envelopes with a heart sticker. I was the forgotten mother behind their lifestyle, the second mortgage co-signer, the emergency fund they always dipped into, the invisible benefactor. The lemon cake is in my freezer now. I slice off a piece sometimes when the house feels too quiet. It still tastes like love, but now, also like clarity. I made 24 lemon glazed slices, arranged in a circle on top like petals in a sunflower. Jacob had loved lemon pound cakes since he was 9. The year he insisted chocolate was too boring and declared citrus tasted like sunshine. I'd gotten up before first light on baking day, steadying my hands to zest each lemon carefully, protecting the golden crust with paper towels to keep it from sliding during the drive. They grumbled about my joints, and I waved them off. My sister Darlene gave me her standard lecture as I packed up. "At least take your phone and call when you get there." "Yes, mother," I joked, though we were just 2 years apart. "Someone's gotta keep you alive," she muttered, already turning back to her crossword puzzle. I pulled out of the driveway at 4:30 a.m., my overnight bag tucked beside me, holding my softest cardigan and the good slippers. I brought the lavender hand cream Jacob used to love when he was little, used to press it to his nose and call it sleepy magic. The thermos of coffee kept me company, steam fogging the windshield at every stoplight. I imagined his surprised grin, the kind that still tilted slightly to one side. "Mom? What are you doing here?" And maybe if I was lucky, that long, real hug, the kind we hadn't shared in years. The highway unspooled before me like a thread I was determined to follow. Even as rain blurred the edges of everything, trucks roared past, flinging curtains of water onto my windshield, forcing me to slow to 50, then 45. I leaned forward, as if squinting into the storm might somehow clear it. The cake sat secure in its tin beside me. A small act of love, I hoped, might cut through the frost that had crept into our relationship, bypassing the obligatory phone calls and precisely timed holiday dinners. I turned the heat up as the chills settled into my knees. The dashboard clock read 9:47 a.m. 5 more hours. And maybe, just maybe, a moment worth the drive. Assuming the storm didn't slow me any further, I popped an ibuprofen straight from the glove box, dry, bitter, and unforgiving. My hips ached, my knuckles pulsed. To distract myself, I let my mind wander to birthdays past. Jacob at 9, cheeks round with joy as he tore through the yellow tissue paper to find his new art set. Lemon pound cake crumbs clinging to his chin. Rain drummed harder, tapping the roof like impatient fingers. Up ahead, Brake lights flashed. A truck had jackknifed near the median, forcing traffic to snake around emergency crews. Their sirens cast blue and red pulses across the glossy asphalt. My GPS recalculated. 45 minutes added. I sighed and pressed a heated seat button, even though it had stopped helping an hour ago. By early afternoon, my body was a small rebellion of aches, lower back spasms, a stiff neck, hips screaming despite the ibuprofen. But I've always believed that love and determination make a powerful anesthetic. I'd once driven through a snowstorm to get Jacob to a regional art competition. Windshield wipers barely keeping up. Hot chocolate and a travel mug by his feet. This was no different. I checked the cake one more time at a red light. 24 lemon-glazed slices arranged in a bright sunflower pattern, each one brushed with care and tucked into place with parchment to prevent sliding. A small triumph in a Tupperware. I pulled into their driveway. Just after 2:00 p.m. the thunder had moved off, but a light drizzle still fell, misting the windshield. I pulled my hood over my curls, grabbed the cake, and stepped out. It was just 25 feet to the door, but by the time I crossed it, water was running down the back of my neck, soaking into my good slippers. I didn't ring the bell. The door was unlocked, as it always was when they were expecting someone. Just not me. The entryway was warm, smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic. My feet left damp prints on the slate tile. I steadied the cake in my arms, heart pounding more than it should have been. I told myself a simple surprise would suffice. Maybe even laughter. Maybe a hug. I was about to round the corner when I heard my name. Mom called again this morning, Jacob said, his voice carrying with that clipped tone I'd noticed more often. Third time this week. What did she want this time? Claire asked, disinterested, maybe even irritated. I froze. The cake box grew heavy. Same as always, Jacob replied. To talk about nothing. To remind me she's alone. To try and guilt me for not calling enough. My breath caught, like the air had thickened. I should have turned and walked out then, but I didn't. She needs a hobby, Claire said, chuckling. Or a man, or a cat. Anything but this martyr routine. Jacob laughed. Or maybe she just gets lost for a while. Take a sabbatical from motherhood. I stood there, soaked, the lemon cake trembling slightly in my grip. Not a single slice out of place. Give us a weekend without the guilt trips. Their laughter tangled in the air, bittersweet as lemon and just as sharp. The cake box trembled in my arms. My son had nursed through ear infections, driven to early morning soccer games, stayed up with when monsters lived under the bed, had just wished me away. Claire's voice floated in next. Or maybe she'll just get lost on the drive. A few days of peace would be nice. I didn't hear remorse. Only ease. Familiar ease. I turned and walked out. Raindrops streaking down the back of my coat like punctuation. By the time I reached the car, my hips were howling and my breath was shallow, but my hands had stopped trembling. I slid the lemon pound cake onto the passenger seat beside me. Its bright glaze smudged on the lid and started the engine. Funny how clarity arrives precisely when something breaks. The windshield wipers ticked their rhythm. Left, right, ache, truth, ache again. In the rearview mirror, I saw Jacob step onto the porch. Claire followed, arms crossed. But I kept driving. I didn't know where I was headed, only where I wouldn't return. The highway unfolded ahead like ribbon from an unraveling gift no longer meant for me. I drove until the fuel light blinked amber. A neon sign flickered into view, vacancy buzzing like it had something to prove. A roadside motel with plastic flowers by the lobby door and a single clerk, who barely looked up as I checked in. Inside, beneath the harsh bathroom light, I studied my reflection. Eyes ringed with fatigue, hair damp with humidity, a woman stripped of illusion. I showered. I dressed in yesterday's clothes. I turned on my phone. 31 missed calls, 48 texts. Jacob, Mom, please, call me back. Claire, you misunderstood. It wasn't about you. Jacob, we were just kidding. You always overthink. Claire, Margot, let us explain. Jacob, you're scaring me now. Just come back. I didn't reply. Instead, I found a temporary apartment in Nashville, close enough to collect the essentials, far enough to begin again. The first call I took was from my sister, Darlene. Margot, thank God, I've been calling for 2 days. Jacob said something happened. I told her everything. How I'd driven through lightning in memory. How I'd stood in the foyer with lemon-scented hope melting in my arms. How I'd heard my son speak of me like a burden. There was silence on her end. 3 long beats. Then, "What do you need right now?" Not forgiveness, not advice, just space. And that was enough. 3 days at the new place gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Solitude without sorrow. No calendar alerts. No calls to return. I bought neutral clothes Jacob would have called boring, which meant I liked them. I silenced my phone except for Darlene and updates on Mr. Darcy, my cat. The financial records came next. 8 credit accounts. The newest opened 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when Jacob had cried over Claire's job loss. And I'd offered money. He'd refused, saying, "We don't need your charity, Mom. Just your moral support." But what he really meant was this. My signature was worth more than my sympathy. I'd co-sign everything. Not anymore. After the bank, I called Jacob's old college fund advisor, a man who used to send birthday cards when Jacob was little. Margot Lynn. My goodness. It's been, what? 6 years. Too long, I said. But I'm calling about something current. I need a comprehensive account review. Later that week, Claire's voice came through a voicemail. Jacob says the beach house should close next month. We're so grateful the loan from your side really helped make it happen. Only I hadn't contributed. Not knowingly. But the puzzle was starting to form. That night, I sat cross-legged on the motel bed, surrounded by statements, emails, handwritten notes building a timeline that, when laid bare, looked less like coincidence and more like quiet exploitation. Every dollar they'd pulled from me had a matching emotional withdrawal. I called Harriet, my lawyer. "I need to change my will." "Is this about Jacob?" she asked, always direct. "Yes," I said, "but mostly it's about me." "Thursday, 10 sharp," she replied. "We'll begin." When I hung up, I didn't feel hurt or rage, not anymore. Only a calm, deliberate kind of clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was repair. Justice, starting with the woman in the mirror. Harriet's office overlooked the Carolina coast, all fog and steel gray waves. The chairs were too modern to be comfortable, but the legal team was precise. I outlined my wishes, specific bequests to friends who'd shown real care. To Darlene, to Theta, and yes, to Mr. Darcy, who would have fresh tuna for life. "And for Jacob?" Harriet asked, pen poised. I paused. "My recipe box," I said, "and my journals. Let him read about the mother he discounted, about the life he never thought to ask about." Harriet raised a brow. "Oof, deliciously poetic." We moved on to the financial untangling. Harriet called in her partner, an expert in fiduciary law. We crafted letters, revoked permissions, froze co-signed access. When the final account was reviewed, I saw it. Loans opened in both our names. Promises made without my consent. My stability turned into leverage. Then came the beach house. I contacted the lender. "I'm calling regarding the co-financing arrangements," I said. "Of course, Miss Lynn," the voice replied. "You're listed as contributing half the down payment. That's why we approved the loan." I laughed. Not kindly, not bitterly, just amazed. "Well," I said, "I'm not, and I won't be. Thought you should know that before closing." That night, back at the motel, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. No champagne, no confetti, but peace. No more Claire, no more evasions, no more financing a life that didn't include me. Except when my credit score was convenient. I texted Jacob one last time. "The woman you hoped would crash has woken up. I won't be part of this anymore." Then I blocked his number. I booked a flight for the next morning. 7 hours on the road had brought me pain. 90 minutes in the air would carry me to resolution. Back in Asheville, the Craftsman cottage felt different. Lighter. The lemon tree I'd planted after my diagnosis was blooming. I walked past the empty guest room without flinching. Mr. Darcy met me at the door with his usual skepticism, then curled into my lap like he hadn't doubted me at all. That evening, Theta came by with the promised scotch. We sat on the back porch while twilight slipped over the garden. "They've been calling daily," she said, sipping slowly. "Want to know where you are, what you're planning." I smiled. Just a little. Let them wonder. Jacob's letter arrived with no apology, no acknowledgement, just concern. Carefully packaged to sound like love, but I recognized the shape of fear when I saw it. Financial panic, disguised as filial worry. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the old tin box where I kept Jacob's childhood drawings, adding this final document to the archive of our unraveling. That evening, another unfamiliar number lit up my phone. "The beach house closing is next Friday," said the voice I knew too well. Jacob didn't bother with pleasantries. "The sellers won't wait. We need your guarantee back in place by Monday." But that guarantee was gone, legally withdrawn. The next week, envelopes began arriving. Statements, late notices, notifications from credit card companies, a crumbling paper trail of loans, accounts, and obligations I'd been unknowingly linked to. They'd used me, my credit, my silence, my love to build a financial house of cards. On Wednesday, a text from another unknown number. "Mom, please, we're going to lose the beach house. All that money gone. Is that really what you want?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because that message told me everything. They'd taken help from Zoe's parents for the down payment while telling me they couldn't afford to visit for Christmas. Zoe's silence had always been an answer in itself. I met Zoe a week later, at a cafe neither of us liked, halfway between Asheville and their coastal town. The wind rattled the windows. "I'm not here to complain," I told her calmly. "I'm here to give you this." I slid a plain white envelope across the table. "It's an invitation. My 79th birthday. Next month. I'd like you to come." Her eyes widened as she opened it. "Jacob isn't invited," I added. "Neither are you. If you bring him." She left without a word, shaken. But I felt no triumph, no regret. Just a firm knowing that truth once spoken cannot be unspoken. 2 nights later, Jacob called. I let it go to voicemail. The next morning, another number. I picked up. "You said you hoped I would crash," I said quietly, cutting him off before he could launch into the usual dance about wanting a weekend without my guilt trips. Silence. "That was," he began. "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't lie to me now." His voice cracked. Then came the sobbing. Not the crocodile tears I'd come to recognize, but the raw sound of something breaking open. "We didn't mean it," he said. "We were stressed. You call so much, and you always sound lonely. It made us feel guilty. That's the problem," I said gently. "You see my love as a burden. You haven't been honest with me in years. Not about your finances, not about your feelings, not about my place in your life." His reply was faint. "That's not true." "When's the last time you visited without asking for something?" I asked. "When's the last time you called just to talk? Not to soften me up or manage my expectations?" He said nothing. And that silence? That was my answer. "I won't be your bank anymore," I said. "And I won't be your emotional parachute. You can't call it love and use it as currency." He tried again later. The guilt, the pleading. "I'm still your son," he said. "This can't be it." I laughed genuinely this time. "You mean the son who told me he couldn't afford groceries while signing for a beach house in my name? That one? So that's it?" he asked. "You're erasing 30 years over one overheard conversation?" "Not erasing," I said, my voice clear, transforming. "I still love the child you were and the man you could become. But I no longer accept the role you've assigned me. Unpaid safety net and invisible mother." This spring, I planted tomatoes again, and asparagus finally taking Theta's advice. Perennials. Things that take time to root, but give back for decades once they do. At 78, I still had time to grow something lasting, something real. 6 weeks after the thunderstorm that changed everything, I threw myself a birthday party in the garden of my Asheville cottage. Not the grand, exhausting kind Jacob and Zoe always insisted on, just the kind I wanted. I used the good china I'd saved for important occasions that never came. I wore the silk scarf I bought years ago and never unwrapped. We served lemon pound cake with a bright glaze and toasted under the warm May sky. Harriet raised her glass first. To Margot, who at 79 has more grace than most people half her age. To new beginnings, Theta added. And to finally knowing your own worth. I looked around. Old friends, new ones, neighbors who cared enough to check on me without needing anything in return. And I felt it. That's something I'd been missing. Family, not defined by blood or obligation, but by truth, respect, and care. I started volunteering at the women's shelter 2 weeks later. Resume help, interview prep, sometimes just listening. You're not like most of the older volunteers, one young woman told me, brushing ink off a job application. You get it, how someone can love you and still hurt you. I nodded. I've had some experience. Jacob's birthday gift came in late July. A generic restaurant card in a padded envelope with a printed message, "Hope you're doing well. Happy belated." I tucked it in the same box where I kept his finger-painted son from 2nd grade, a relic of someone he used to be, and someone I no longer needed to chase. No personal note, no acknowledgement of our last conversation. I sent a polite thank you text, maintaining the boundary I'd established. Cordiality without capitulation. The financial consequences continued to unfold for Jacob and his partner. Through Martha, with whom I now met for coffee monthly, I learned they'd downsized to a smaller craftsman cottage in Asheville, unable to maintain their tutor without my financial backing. Jacob had taken a second job. A child changes everything, sometimes by their presence, sometimes by their absence. I wish you the wisdom to value what matters most. If you ever want to discuss a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than financial entanglement, my door remains open. With love, I wrote. She didn't respond, but I hadn't expected her to. Some seeds take time to germinate, if they grow at all. 6 months after that thunderstorm drive to Connecticut, I sat in my kitchen grading grocery lists in red pen, making a shopping list for Thanksgiving dinner. Jacob called. "Mom, I'll be there in 3 hours." The drive to Hartford was nothing like the one 6 months before. No rain, no lemon pound cake, no anticipation of joy or subsequent devastation. Just clear November sunshine and the steady hum of my car on the highway, carrying me toward a conversation 6 months and 20 years in the making. Jacob looked smaller in the hospital bed, his hand resting protectively over the slight swell of his wife's abdomen. When he saw me, tears filled his eyes. Not the manipulative tears of years past, but ones born from genuine effort and regret. His voice broke. For loving me unconditionally when I couldn't love myself that way. It wasn't a complete reckoning. Such things take years, not months. But it was a beginning, a seed breaking through hard ground. The financial stuff, he continued. Losing the beach house, downsizing, having to take that second job, it's been hard. Really hard. But my therapist says, he gave a small watery laugh. She says it's the best thing that ever happened to me. He was trying, if only for Jacob's sake and the child they were expecting. As for me, I maintained the life I'd built during our estrangement. The women's shelter remained in my will, though I added a trust for my grandchild's education. My friendships deepened. My blueberry bushes took root. I continued painting watercolors, hiking local trails, and baking new recipes entirely my own creation. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as consequence and boundary, one choice at a time. The timer rang. It was time to take the cake out of the oven. Time to move forward. Eyes open. Heart cautious but not closed. Time to accept that some journeys begin not with a 7-hour drive through a thunderstorm, but with the courage to say enough. I am worth more than this. We all are. At what age did you finally learn to value yourself above others' expectations?